I'm going to be talking to Lionel Kambeitz, who's the executive chairman of Delta CleanTech of Calgary, about their carbon capture and storage technology and their expansion into China. So welcome to the interview, Lionel.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be able to talk about what we're doing in carbon capture.
I'm really interested in this because, of course, China was front and center at the COP26 meetings that just ended in Glasgow, and how to get their emissions down. We don't talk about carbon capture and storage with respect to China very much. So tell us about the projects that you've got going on there.
Happy to talk about it, and happy to talk about the unique market that China poses. First, when you look at the market itself, Markham, the fact remains is there's still tens of millions of people that are waiting for reliable electrification, and it's unusual to have a country try to lower its carbon footprint while it's still trying to create reliable electrification for a lot of its citizens. So it's a unique challenge. They're very conscientious and concerned about coal and concrete manufacturing. And the coal-fired power plants, the carbon that's going to be captured from those is primarily being used for enhanced oil recovery, is what it's being used for. So there's a use for that CO2 when it's done being captured.
Okay, and the technology that you've developed in Alberta, I mean, this is, I interviewed Mackenzie, the big international consulting firm not that long ago on carbon capture and storage, and they identified Canada as one of the, if not the leading country when it comes to this kind of technology. So is your technology now economic in China?
The technology is economic when you're utilizing it for enhanced oil recovery, and that's relative to the value of what that's going to do on that oil reservoir. In all other markets, there's a need for a penalty or some sort of punitive or a carbon credit to be able to make the technology viable.
Right. Now, I understand that not that long ago, I think it was maybe a year or two, that China brought in a carbon market. They started with the electricity system, and then I guess the plan is to expand it to the rest of the economy. What role will that carbon market play in your projects?
It won't be that substantial. The internalized carbon market's going to remain within the Chinese partners, and really we look more towards the carbon markets to the 29 global exchanges led by the European trading system, of course. But the Chinese carbon market's going to be more internalized. But the great hope for China, for me, is, first of all, they are engaged in introducing the technology of carbon capture, and they are indeed using it for CO2 enhanced oil recovery. They are radically engaged in the utilization of CO2 as a building block for new materials. And you and I know that if the Chinese put their minds to low-cost manufacturing, they may be the first country that will be building products that you and I will buy that use CO2 as a building block of those products. So very encouraged by that. And I'm also encouraged by the fact that they don't have as large a mobile fleet to electrify in terms of automotive ownership, but ultimately the fleet is new, and they'll be able to have probably the quickest electrification of their cars, perhaps, in the world as well, per capita. So there's some great things in front of us for China that I think are meaningful.
So in Alberta, the focus is on capturing CO2 and then taking it via pipeline out to an abandoned oil and gas reservoir, and then storing it underground. Where would it be stored? And I mean, aside from the enhanced oil recovery, that's obvious in China. But are there reservoirs? Are there salt caverns? Is there geology suitable for storing CO2? In the various regions of the country.
There is actually the deep storage of brine and pore space, the aquifers there. There's knowledge, and there's suitable, there is suitable formations to be able to do that. Initially, there's a focus on not S, CCU utilization, and primarily enhanced oil recovery, and primarily the manufacturing of some of these new technologies, similar to what you saw or we've seen in Calgary at the NMAC Shepherd Center in Calgary, where the Carbon X Prize was held, where there was 5 emerging technologies that used carbon dioxide as the building blocks of new products.
Yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed the CEO of LanzaTech, which has developed a microbe-based process that, combined with clean energy, I mean, they're making the precursor that Lululemon turns into shorts, for instance, or they have a subsidiary that turns it into sustainable jet fuel. I mean, it's amazing where this is going, and that's the direction of the Chinese. What role is the central Chinese government playing in this? Is there going to be, a lot of financial support, regulation? Where are they?
I think first of all, facilitation is very important, and many of the entities that we are dealing with in China were ex-crown sovereign corporations to begin with, so they have deep connections and are still partially owned, often by the crown, by the government. So that facilitation and urging is quite important. The other thing is that we take for granted facilitation. We think we don't understand that in some markets like China, we can reduce the time of yes to the project to commissioning the project by 60%. They clear the path. They get projects done. So I think we have a more rapid deployment, Markham, of the technology in China, and that's always facilitated by government cooperation.
Now, I interviewed an expert on Chinese Canada's technology trade with China last year, and she was mentioning that some firms have had problems with China siphoning off their technology, their intellectual property. What have you done to protect the intellectual property of your company?
Well, I think and that's a difficult question. It has been for a while. North American, European technology leaking into China involuntarily. I'll put it to you that way. Now, the fact remains is that you try to contractually bind with good partners, and you have to establish that through contracts. Now, we've got patents in China on some of our technologies, but of course, most technologies are circumventable and with making small changes. The key, I think, is contracting with bona fide partners, good partners, large corporations that perhaps still have their hands at the government. They want new technologies. They want to optimize our technologies and share in that. And we look at China as a bit of an incubator. In 5 years, some of our technologies will be optimized and improved and used in China, and we'll be bringing those back to North America more cost effectively than today.
Final question, Lionel. So this particular, the 3 projects you've got on the go now are total 400 million Canadian. But if you look out, the next 2 to 5 to 10 years, what's the potential for Delta in China?
I think it's going to be substantial. The electrification of China is still a mandate. It's still moving ahead and has to move ahead. The people need to be electrified. We are living, as you know, you're an expert in this. We're living in an electric world, a new electric world. We've electrified our world, and we'll continue to electrify it. So the coal will produce the kilowatts. They're the most modern coal fleet in the world, so they are very efficient. They've got another 30 to 40 years of life left in them. So I think there's an implementation of technology that's going to roll out there. If you're at an end of life coal plant, you're less inclined to want to spend a few $100 million to capture CO2. But what if you have an early life coal plant? You'd want to capture carbon dioxide so you can extend the life of what I call a decarbonized electron that you're going to sell into the grid. So I think it's very promising and a very promising market for us.
Well, Lionel, good luck in China, and thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Markham. It's a pleasure. Anytime. Thank you.